think there is a shift that is taking place in our culture right now. We're beginning, in a sense, to renew or to revisit our views around the human being. There is something of a growing recognition that within humans there is something distinct, something remarkable. In one way, you would have to say that this aspect of humanity is miraculous. Human consciousness, I think, is something of a miracle. And in the post-Enlightenment Western world of the 21st century, here in 2025, we've largely rejected any form of dualistic thinking for what would be called a naturalistic monism. Now, first, what does that even mean? What's that mean when I say dualism versus monism? Well, it means that people generally believe that everything that exists is a product of naturalistic processes, including human consciousness. So that means that there's no separation between your mind and your body. So you are a monistic whole. Thus, human consciousness is either considered by most people who hold a naturalistic worldview, it's either considered an illusion, it's illusory. This is called eliminativism. And this is basically the view of some atheists, like Daniel Dennett is one who held that view. And then there is another view called emergentism, that consciousness is an emergent phenomena of complex neurology. So at a certain point, when there's a certain level of neuron activity within the nervous system of an individual, then consciousness kind of just like miraculously emerges out of that. That's probably been one of the predominant views among a lot of people in cognitive or neuroscience for a long time. And then there's another view that seems to be growing steam. This is the view that is held by philosophers like a guy named David Chalmers, and then another prominent atheist, Sam Harris, kind of holds this view, and that is that consciousness is a fundamental property of all matter in the universe. This is basically called panpsychism. But there is definitely a shift that is taking place. And I would consider it, in a sense, kind of like a return or a reversion to the mean, the normal. And for the most part of human history, we have been mostly dualistic in our worldview, especially if you are religious, and most people are religious. If you are religious and you believe in any form of the afterlife, then you are basically dualistic. Now, you're probably not as extreme in your view of dualism as someone like René Descartes or what is referred to as Cartesian dualism in your view. But if you are religious and you believe in something like the soul, then you are basically dualistic. In a fascinating turn of events, there is a growing group of formerly monistic naturalists who are kind of like inching towards dualism because of cognitive science and because of neuroscience and because of phenomena such as near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences. There's this growing sense that there are a lot of things, phenomena, that scientific naturalism doesn't have good answers for. And there are also internal and external sort of realities that people see or people experience that cause them to think that there are dimensions to reality beyond our sensory perception. These are everything from like psychedelic experiences, which as a Christian pastor, I think that these get into some pretty crazy sort of things, but psychedelic experiences, or there's been a lot of talk in our culture about UFOs that are now called, I think, UAPs. And so as a result of this, there's this increasing cohort of people that are not convinced that we have left enough room in our knowledge of the universe, of the world, for us to adequately explain things that are not adequately explained by our knowledge of the universe, by scientific knowledge. So in other words, we don't know as much as we think we know. And I think that most people would agree with that. If you have some sort of epistemic humility, like you're humble about what you think you know or what you know, then you're willing to say, like, I don't know everything that is out there. Now, we have witnessed some amazing scientific, medical, technological advancements. So the methodology of science has led to some amazing things. But that methodology and the assumptions that are at the base of what has in many ways become kind of scientism, it puts us in the area where we think we know everything. We certainly don't know everything. We think we're so far advanced from ancient thinkers. And speaking of ancient thinkers, Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, he is touching a little bit on this dimension when he writes in verse 3, "For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh." So when he's talking about flesh, he's talking about the worldly realities or the physical realities, tangible sorts of things. So we walk in the flesh, but we do not war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, they're not fleshly, but mighty in God for the pulling down of strongholds, casting down arguments of every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. So Paul, in this passage, he is talking about a carnal or temporal, the tangible, tactical, fleshly things of this world, which we all comprehend through our senses. That is the world of our five senses. But then there is what Immanuel Kant would call the noumenological world. So there's the phenomenal world. That's everything we can see, touch, taste, and so forth. And then the noumena, the noumenological world. Those are the things that are not tangible to our senses. The world beyond what we can even really imagine or touch, taste, hear, see, smell. There is an intangible, or what Christians going back for a very long time would call an incorporeal spiritual dimension. And it is in that dimension where these strongholds that Paul is talking about in this passage exist. Now, I've been spending a great deal of the time that I have extra time thinking and reading and researching and writing on these things over the last several years because I've been doing PhD research in artificial intelligence ethics, which has led me down the rabbit hole of knowledge and consciousness, cognitive and neuroscience, and getting into the discussions of what is it that separates artificial intelligence, artificial knowledge, which since the advent of OpenAI's ChatGPT in the fall of 2022, it really has brought these sort of things to the forefront. But what separates artificial knowledge and artificial intelligence from human knowledge and human intelligence? Now, I think a lot of the things happening in AI right now are going to challenge us to think much more deeply about these things in the coming years. When a machine can think and even kind of like reason faster than you, and it can accomplish work more efficiently and effectively and inexpensively than you or I, does that mean that we effectively become obsolete, especially in the areas of work? And when we do come into this, when we start to be confronted with these things, and we already are being confronted by this, although the greater populace has not recognized it yet, but when we do, we're going to be confronted with the questions of, these things making us obsolete, do we still maintain dignity and value? And will we maintain meaning and purpose? As those questions begin to arise more frequently, we're going to have to think a bit more about what this world is and what this world is all about and what is our actual place and purpose in all of this as well. Now, these may seem like crazy thoughts, and I guarantee you that people are beginning to think about them more than they did, say, 5 years ago, and they're going to be thinking about them a lot more in the coming months and years as these things pick up steam and we start to see artificial intelligence scale in such a huge way. These thoughts about these very things are actually creating the context for people who have a spiritual worldview, Christians, to speak a bit more boldly and a bit more clearly about what it is that they think and believe, especially about things like David's question in Psalm 8 when he says, "What is man?" That's an important question to think about and something for you to consider. I'll see you next time.